All right, so we're diving into Miles Mathis today, specifically his planetary alignment model and how he uses it to kind of look at the solar cycle. Now, I know we're all solar physicists here, so let's cut to the chase. We don't need the textbook basics.
Yeah, sounds good. Mathis, he really likes to challenge the mainstream view. He really likes to come at it from a mechanics-based point of view.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. So the foundation of his model is this idea of a charge field.
Yeah.
And right away, I think it's important to say that he's very, very clear. That this isn't some mystical thing.
Right, yeah, it's not like some esoteric, hand-wavy
Yeah, he's talking about a physical phenomenon.
Absolutely.
Something real.
Real physical phenomena.
And what's so interesting is he says that this charge field is actually like embedded in Maxwell's equations. It's been there the whole time. Mainstream science has just kind of ignored it.
Right, it's like it's been staring us right in the face.
Yeah, and so what he's saying is this charge field, which is made up of photons, they have specific spin and field densities. They emanate from the planets. And they're directly impacting the sun.
And it's not just any photons either. It's real physical photons that are carrying charge and then setting off these magnetic reactions when they hit the sun.
So it's not a direct magnetic influence like from afar.
Yeah.
But it's this chain reaction that's initiated by these charge-carrying photons.
That's right. It's charge transfer. That's the key here, not just magnetism across space.
Okay, that's a bold claim. I mean, it makes you wonder if we've missed something in how we traditionally understand electromagnetism.
Yeah, I mean, it really challenges the assumptions. And it gets even more interesting when you consider that his model focuses on the alignment of the gas giants, you know, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, but also crucially their alignment with the galactic core. It's like this galactic alignment piece. Wasn't there in his initial theory, but then as he developed it, it became like really, really important.
I'm really curious about that. What led him to include the galactic core in his model? That seems like a big addition.
Well, from what I understand, he was really focused on these interplanetary alignments at first, but as he went deeper, he just couldn't explain certain solar events without taking the galactic core into account. It's like the core is this amplifier or a modulator of the charge field that's coming from the planets.
Interesting. So how does this all connect back to the solar cycle then? How does Mathis explain the ups and downs, the variations we see in solar activity?
Well, he says that when these planets align in specific ways, especially when they line up with the galactic core, their combined charge field just gets stronger. And then that triggers higher solar activity. And then conversely, when they're out of alignment or in like specific opposing configurations, the charge field weakens. And that leads to those periods of low solar activity.
So the solar cycle basically becomes like a reflection of these celestial alignments and how they're impacting the sun's charge field. Okay, I'm starting to see how this model could explain some of what we're seeing. Yeah. But it also raises a lot of questions. Like, how does he reconcile this whole charge field idea with what we currently understand about the sun's internal dynamo?
Right, that's one of the main points of contention, isn't it? Yeah, he doesn't completely throw out the internal dynamo, though. He kind of suggests that it's playing more of a secondary role. He says the charge field from the planets is really the main driver. It's like modulating the dynamo's activity. And that's what ultimately controls the timing and the intensity of the solar cycle.
So it's almost like he's proposing an external trigger for the solar cycle rather than it all being internal.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big shift from how we usually think about it. Okay, well, let's get into his track record. How well has this model actually done in predicting solar activity? Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Right. The predictive power is key. And you know, Mathis has made some very specific predictions. Some of them have been spot on, and others not so much.
Okay, so let's start with the hits. What are some of the things he's gotten right?
Well, one of the big ones was that he correctly predicted the end of cycle 24 back in 2018. And that was actually against what most people were saying.
Oh, wow. So he went against the consensus.
He did.
And he was right.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Okay, what about the current cycle, cycle 25? How do his predictions line up with what we're actually observing?
So he also correctly predicted that cycle 25 would be weak. And he attributed that to those specific planetary alignments that we were talking about, specifically that square alignment of Neptune with the galactic core.
Right.
He says that configuration has been a major factor in keeping solar activity low for the past few decades. So he sees that as more evidence to support his model.
Okay, so he's got a couple of wins there. But you said not all of his predictions have been perfect. Where has his model kind of fallen short?
So one thing was, His initial prediction for the peak of cycle 25 had to be adjusted after he factored in the galactic core. He admitted that he kind of underestimated its influence at first.
Oh, interesting.
So even with that adjustment, there are still some differences between his predicted peaks and the actual observed peaks for some cycles.
Okay, so those discrepancies, do they raise any red flags?
Yeah.
I mean, are they big enough to suggest that his model might be wrong, or is it more like they just point to areas that need to be refined?
Well, that's kind of how he addresses it. He says the model is still a work in progress and that these inconsistencies are actually opportunities to make it better.
So he's not giving up on it?
No, not at all. He's constantly refining it, taking in new data, adjusting his calculations.
Makes sense.
And speaking of unexpected events, there was that solar spike on October 28th, 2024. That really caught everyone off guard.
Oh, yeah, that was a surprise. Nobody saw that coming.
No.
And that could actually be more support for Mathis's model, because he has said that.
Yeah.
These seemingly random spikes in activity could be connected to subtle shifts in planetary alignments, even ones that we might not easily notice.
Exactly. He's saying that even small changes in planetary positions, especially in relation to the galactic core, could have a big impact on the charge field, and therefore solar activity.
So he's not seeing that spike as a contradiction. He's seeing it as more evidence that the solar system is really sensitive to these planetary influences.
Right. And now for the part everyone's been waiting for, Mathis's predictions for 2025 and beyond. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's hear it. What does he think is going to happen with solar activity?
Well, he predicts that cycle 25 might actually have multiple peaks, with the strongest one potentially happening in 2027.
Multiple peaks.
Yeah. He says that's because all four of the gas giants are going to be in a particularly favorable alignment, along with the galactic core. And he thinks that alignment is going to create a super strong charge field that's going to drive a surge in solar activity.
Okay, a strong peak in 2027. That would definitely be something. But what about the long term? Does he think this increased activity is going to continue, or are we going to go back to a quieter sun?
Well, that's where his long-term predictions get really fascinating. He thinks solar activity is going to keep increasing in the coming decades. As Neptune moves away from that square alignment to the core, he thinks as that alignment changes, we're going to see a gradual intensification of the solar cycle. And it could lead to a period of high solar activity that we haven't seen in centuries.
Wow, it's a pretty big prediction. A prolonged period of high solar activity would have some pretty major implications for us here on Earth. I mean, what are some of the potential consequences that Mathis is talking about?
Well, he thinks we could see a lot more solar storms, flares, coronal mass ejections, and they could be a lot stronger too. And that could have a huge impact on our technology, like disrupting power grids, communication systems, even satellite operations.
Yeah, so we might be looking at a future where solar storms are a lot more common, and they have a much bigger impact on our lives. And this isn't just hypothetical. We've already seen when these storms can do right.
Oh, absolutely. Like the Carrington event back in 1859. That messed up telegraph systems all over the world. It's a reminder that the sun is incredibly powerful. And these days, we rely on technology so much more. So a major solar storm today could be even worse.
That's a scary thought. It really makes you think about how connected we are to the sun and how vulnerable we are to it.
Yeah, it's something we need to take seriously. But it's not all bad news. If we're more aware and prepared, we can do a lot to reduce the risk.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, investing in more resilient infrastructure, developing early warning systems, having backup plans in place. Those are all crucial steps.
Right, so it's about understanding the risks and then taking steps to prepare for them and to minimize the damage. But let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture of Mathis's model, if he's right. And these planetary alignments are really what's driving the solar cycle. What does that say about our understanding of the sun?
It would mean there are forces at work that we haven't fully figured out yet, that the connection between the planets and the sun is way more complex than we thought. It would make us rethink some of our basic ideas about solar physics and what's causing solar activity.
Yeah, it's like we've been studying the sun in isolation, focusing on what's happening inside it, but not really considering the influence of the other planets.
Exactly, like studying a person without understanding their family.
I like that analogy.
And what's so cool about Mathis's model is that it tries to connect those two things, what's happening inside the sun and the external influences from the planets.
It gives us a wider perspective and makes us think about the solar system as this interconnected system, where even tiny changes in one part can have big effects on the whole thing.
That's a great way to put it.
And that brings us back to what this deep dive has been all about. Whether Mathis's model turns out to be completely right or not, it's gotten people talking, it's challenged us to question what we thought we knew.
Absolutely.
And to look for new possibilities.
That's what science is all about, right?
Yeah, always pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, trying to understand the universe better.
Exactly.
So we've really dug into Mathis's planetary alignment model, his logic, his evidence, the things he's gotten right and wrong, and his predictions for the future. Now it's up to you to decide what you think.
We encourage you to check out Mathis's work for yourself. All the links to his papers are in the show notes. Go deep into the details and see what you discover. Because at the end of the day, learning is a team effort. And every new idea, every challenge to the status quo helps us get a clearer picture of the universe.
Well said. Who knows? Maybe these unconventional ideas hold the key to understanding the sun even better and its impact on our world. Until next time, stay curious and keep looking up